Hello and welcome to the Disruptive Innovation Festival, a 3-week-long online event that showcases the latest ideas, innovations and technologies that are shifting the global economy. My name is Seb Reed. I'm a member of the technical and facilitation team here at the Disruptive Innovation Festival. And I'm really pleased to be joined by Like and Marley from Flow2, an asset sharing digital platform. I know that the guys are really keen to get your questions and your engagement for this session. And the best ways to do that are either via social media using #ThinkDiff, or even easier on the comments page which this stream is embedded on. I'll be picking up those questions and posting them through to the guys, and they'll be interjecting those into their conversation. So do get those in, and without any further ado, I'll hand over to Marley to introduce the content of the session.
Great, thank you, Seb. Welcome everybody. I would like to introduce Like to you. She started Flow2 Healthcare about 3 years ago, and has become quite the expert on asset sharing. She will explain to you a little bit how we started, what we do, and what this could mean for the business-to-business sharing economy. So without no further ado, here's Like.
Thanks, Marla. Welcome everybody to this session. Flow2 is the first business-to-business sharing marketplace, and I'll just, the coming 50 minutes, I'll take you through what that is exactly and what the possible advantages are. So if you look at the circular economy, which I'm sure you've all heard of and are quite familiar with, a very important part of that is making better use of what we already have. So avoiding production of new products, but just reusing what's already there. We see a whole new generation of people, actually the 20 years and the people after that, they are valuing ownership more than access. So you see that they don't really want to have a car driving on their porch. They just want to get from A to B. So they are looking for services rather than products. And in development of that is that you see, some people call it the sharing economy, but people are starting to share everything they have, from cars to houses. I think Airbnb is the biggest example of that everybody knows. People are sharing pets, they are sharing meals, bicycles, actually everything you can imagine that you can possess now becomes available to other people, neighbors, colleagues, other people on the internet. So that's the consumer-to-consumer sharing economy. And here at Flow2 we recognize that, and then we said, well, if people have garages full of stuff, then organizations must have warehouses full of stuff. So why not create a platform where organizations can start sharing their temporarily idle assets? So that's what Flow2 did. We created a platform on which organizations can rent out and sell their idle assets to each other when they're not needing it, or they can rent in or buy something from another organization just in case they need it for a short period of time, for example. That's what we did, and then that's about 5 years ago. We started this big global platform on which organizations can start sharing assets. Then we saw, through the development of this big anonymous internet, that actually people are using this internet to create communities based on geography, or they are creating communities based on common interests. So this whole global sharing, it's quite a big step for many organizations. It's quite scary to start sharing maybe some of your expensive equipment, because, well, who knows what might happen. So when we noticed this development of communities, we said maybe we should introduce that too. So that's how we started creating local communities. So we create sharing marketplaces for existing communities that are already connected. That can either be geographically, so maybe business parks, or it can be communities that are connected based on a common interest. So it can be, for example, members of a procurement organization. And then we even went a step further, and we introduced a new internal sharing marketplace for bigger organizations with multiple departments or even facilities that say, okay, we want to create transparency of all the assets that we have that we don't know of, that are in all these departments, and people are, well, procuring something new, whilst Department B has it standing idle. So if you create transparency, then you can get a lot of efficiency within your organization and avoid a lot of costs and buying new equipment and stuff, because you can start it in your organization, start sharing it in your organization. So what are the advantages of sharing? Obviously, it's financially smart, because if you have something standing idle, it costs money. It's not just cost neutral, it's actually costing you money. For example, as Marla said, I started in healthcare. An operating room that you're not using is very expensive, because there's all kinds of equipment that you cannot turn off. So it's costing energy, it's costing maintenance, it's servicing. So it's very expensive. If you have the possibility now to rent it out to another organization, you can actually generate some additional turnover. Or, on the other hand, you may be able to avoid costs because you can rent in what you need just for the time you need it, or you can buy it from someone who's no longer using it, which would be much cheaper than buying it new. Secondly, obviously, it's more sustainable, because if we are making better use of what we already have, we can avoid production of new products, which would save a lot of energy and scarce resources. So it perfectly fits in a sustainable business plan. And then it's social. What we see is that people or organizations are now finding each other that would normally not really be collaborating. So they can be either neighbors on a business park and completely do their own business, not knowing what the other one is doing. But maybe one has a certain part of certain equipment that the other one might temporarily need. In hospitals, for example, we see that the cardiology department is considering buying a new ultrasound machine, whilst gynecology is having it and they're not using it all the time. Those two departments would normally not really find each other because they don't really interfere with each other. So now through this sharing marketplace, you get a whole new vibe in your organization or in your network, where new social bonds, and who knows to what other collaborations that might lead. So that's the really interesting part of asset sharing. It's actually, well, it's a radically innovative way of managing your business. It's not just about equipment and stuff. It's also for excess stock, for example. But we also have organizations that use it to share knowledge of their staff. So that can be staff that have had particular training on, for example, lean management. So they have done a project within their own organization. They're done, but now that knowledge just sits there in that person. So another organization might consider also sending someone on training, but they can also rent in or hire that person from that organization. And the first organization can actually regain some of their investment on that employee, and the other one can avoid a whole investment. We see one hospital that is using it to post jobs for people that are temporarily not able to do their regular job. For example, if you have a nurse, she has a physical job, so if she strained her ankle and she can't do her job by the bed, then she can actually do some administrative tasks for another department, and normally she would be at home being ill. So they are avoiding a lot of sick leave by allowing people to do smaller jobs for other departments. So those are some examples of how asset sharing is used. I think, I'm sorry, there's a question coming in. Well, let's have questions.
Yeah, I think, I hope that your story has given everyone a little bit better idea of what asset sharing entails and how it can be used in a business situation and for organizations. But let's take a look at some questions and then help answer them. So someone asked, At a previous DIF event, a speaker described the importance of a trust as a new currency. Is that a factor in this kind of asset sharing, or not really a factor at all?
Well, obviously, that's a very important factor, because if you are going to share your expensive equipment or your staff, then trust is well, it's huge. So we also get that from a lot of organizations. What happens if something breaks down? What if I don't have it back in time? You know, if you rent out something and you need it back the next morning and it's not there, what happens? So trust is really important. So like all the other platforms, we also have we implemented the possibility to review all the users. So and that's the digital your digital identity that you get from your actions online. We work with third parties that can fulfill some of the needs that arise. So, for example, if you want to transport something from A to B, you may need some additional help from third parties. If you are considering buying or renting some expensive equipment, maybe you want some external review before you buy it, if the value is like they say it is. So there are some third parties that are attached to us that are helping us to provide this trust. It's of major importance, yes.
Besides, well, trust and helping it, or helping it become easier to trust, and using these reviews, the third-party services, other services that will help establish trust. Can you share a little bit more about how, of it being a business-to-business marketplace, how that affects trust, or maybe perhaps what other obstacles are that we had to overcome?
Well, some of the major obstacles, well, the first major obstacle we have is the mind shift. We come from a time that it was just very common for every person, but also for every organization, to have everything you needed by yourself. So everybody was just running their own shop with a very strong sense of competition. So you don't want to show to your neighbors what you're doing, because maybe they want to do it as well. So this whole asset sharing fits in the new era where you have new values, where trust is a very important value, but it's also searching for win-win, looking more for a collaborative way of working together rather than just existing apart from each other. So the mind shift is one of the things that we've been working on for the past few years. And actually we see that when I started with Flow to Healthcare 4 years ago, I had to go and explain to everybody what it was. What is circular economy? What is a sharing economy? And that we can actually start using internet to optimize usage of our own stuff, which is the most logical thing to do. Now, if I talk to people, everybody knows Airbnb, so I don't have to explain it anymore. And everybody understands that sharing what we have is the most logical thing, and creating transparency on our available capacity is the most logical thing. It's just the step from thinking to doing that is still quite a hurdle for some organizations.
Right. I guess that brings us to the next question. How's it been going, overcoming it, and how big is Flow2 and how fast is it growing? Thank you for asking.
Yeah, good question. How many, Marla, do you know how many users we have actually?
It's quite hard to establish an exact number, since a lot of, we like to look at the transactions that are made, but because of the business-to-business nature of the platform, a lot of the transactions happen outside of the platform, because businesses are able to look or to find each other, and that's not something that we want to limit. But we are nearing, we are over 10,000 individual users, but these users are divided over different types of platforms. So we have our global platform, we have the community platforms, and we have the internal sharing platforms. And all those users combined are adding up to quite a number. Perhaps it's good to share some examples of these different platforms too, to show which direction we're growing in.
Yeah, so that's actually what we see is that since we've been introducing first these local communities, that we see the numbers is increasing. So we have, for example, some professional sports clubs that have business clubs attached to them. That's a typical Dutch thing, I think. But these businesses are attached to the sports club, obviously for networking purposes. So now they have platforms where they can create transparency on their core business. That's the first interest, of course. And then they can also create transparency on all the equipment that they use for that. And then maybe they can start sharing it there. So we have quite a number of sports clubs that are doing that. We also have quite some business parks that are connected that way. And then since last May, we introduced this internal sharing marketplace just for businesses or organizations. And we see that that is probably the step that makes it feasible for organizations to start implementing this, because it's quite safe to start. Well, it's also a big step to to open up between departments, because everybody has their budget and then who gets what. But if you have the senior management on board, they have to overcome that hurdle. And we see some healthcare organizations that are now starting to implement this. We have the first hospital that started this in May. And in the first 6 months, they were able to avoid 10,000 euros of investments by just making better use of what they already had in-house. So that's quite impressive, I guess.
That could bring us to another question. You obviously mentioned a little bit for the internal sharing what needs to happen for an organization to implement it, but could you elaborate a little bit more on that too? That's perhaps interesting to hear a little bit more about as well.
Yeah. Well, what we've discovered is one of the major things is that an organization has to admit that they have idle assets, and that can be quite well, it can be an ego thing, because you're sometimes talking to the manager whose job it is not to have overcapacity, and then they have to admit that they do. So that's quite difficult. But if you're honest, then every organization has equipment standing idle. They have excess stock they're not using, and they have people with particular knowledge that are not always using that knowledge to the best they can. So that's the first thing, that you have to admit that you have idle assets. Then it's very important that the directors and the senior management are on board of this. They have to see the financial, the sustainable, and the social advantages. They have to see that they can use this asset sharing to create a whole mind shift within their organization, because they have to make someone available, because this may seem simple and it is the most logical thing to do, but it is a radically innovative way to manage your assets. So it needs energy to get this going and to keep it going after the initial enthusiasm has faded away. So you need manpower behind this. You need good communication. If you have a communication department, it should be involved internally, to maintain enthusiasm, but also externally, because you want other organizations and municipalities in the area to know that you're doing this, because they are your potential customers. And then you need a proper plan. You have to start somewhere with the low-hanging fruits. Don't start with your most advanced, expensive equipment, but just start with something that's not too fragile, or that you're not, using all the time. But we help organizations with that. If they want to start, then
sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, could you maybe share a little more with some specific details, how the hospital that recently started internal sharing, how they implemented it, because that will give a better idea of how it actually
works. So they have a project group of about 3 or 4 people, I believe, from all kinds of different departments. It's quite random, but it's very good that they have a project group, because everybody's busy at some time. So they got the approval of the board of directors, and they had some budget for that as well. So they implemented their internal sharing marketplace. They involved the communication department. We were also closely involved there, and we advised them. They regularly post updates on intranet. they share the latest items that became available. And what I think is very smart is that they designed these labels, and they put these labels on everything that has changed department thanks to this sharing marketplace. So their marketplace is called Win-Win. So the labels have win-win on them. So if you enter a room and you see a piece of equipment or a piece of furniture that has win-win on it, then you know, oh, now it's here. So it's being used again. We've avoided investments.
We received another question. What are the most common products to be shared? What sort of expense of goods is likely to work or not work in an asset sharing model?
Yeah, good question. That's very different for every organization. So far, we're smiling because what we see actually is once you provide this tool to organizations, everybody is just going to use it to their own advantage. So we have another hospital that is using this, and they actually use it to rent out their parking spaces in the weekends, because obviously when they are very busy, other organizations are not. But when it's very quiet at their parking space, there is a concert venue close by that's up then. So they are renting out their parking spaces and even providing transportation between the parking space and the concert venue. So that's something we could never have thought of before. Some organizations are using it for the really easy things like furniture and those kind of things. But actually, like this hospital that has an internal sharing marketplace, that they use it to post jobs for people that are temporarily not able to do their regular job. But they also used it to get a home trainer from the physical therapy department to someone that has an administrative task, that had back problems, that is now recovering next to his desk rather than going outside to another training facility. So you cannot predict really how it's going to be used. Everybody's just going to use it to their own advantage, which is really cool. It drives the creativity of people.
Do you see a correlation between maybe using the platform longer and being able to, or wanting to use it for more, or for the kind of items and services that require that trust, just to grab back to the beginning?
Yes, I think so. Normally, there is one person in an organization that is enthusiastic about it, and they have to go as ambassadors in their organization. So they have to start with something small, and then they get some successes, and then other people start to think, okay, so this may be interesting. And what we've done with several organizations is that we've done brainstorming sessions with management, department heads, and then at first they think, okay, I get this sharing of people drilling machines, just consumer to consumer. But how is this going to work for business to business? Because you get all these other stuff that you have to consider. But then if we start this brainstorming sessions, then we see that people actually get into the idea, and then they start actually sharing their colleagues' stuff, because the colleague says, I have this, but it cannot be shared. And then the other people will say, yes, of course it can be shared if you do this and this and this. So they're inspiring each other, driving each other to look at their own assets in a different way.
Great. And we received another question, interesting one again. Why has this been so successful with healthcare?
Well, because I was there. No. No, I'm not sure. I think first, when I started in healthcare, because Flow2 was already active but not in healthcare, and when I started in healthcare, people said, well, these innovations, they take 7 years to land properly, but you're doing this in healthcare, so it's going to take you 27 years. I didn't believe that, but I think hospitals and other healthcare organizations just have a lot of stuff. And they are sort of aware that they are using public money to do their business, so they may have some pressure there that they have to work more efficiently with what they have. Most healthcare organizations in most countries are pretty tight on budget, to say the least. So it may be money driven. Also, I think that they are pretty used to change, because healthcare changes every couple of years. They have this big new system changes, so they are used to changing everything that they know existed. So I can't say why it is that successful, but well, it really seems to go now.
Great. Perhaps you could share also, yeah, how we or you see the future of this. So what's going to happen with asset sharing in near future, and a little bit further down the road, what can we expect?
Well, I guess now that we have these external marketplaces, I see it happening that a lot of healthcare organizations are starting, and other organizations as well, are starting to share internally. Then get used to the idea, and then, because the cool thing is that if you have an internal sharing marketplace, or your organization is a member of a community, and you have an account, you can, with every advertisement you have, you can just tick a box, and then it becomes visible in another community that you're a member of, or on Flow to Healthcare. So 5 chairs that you're not using anymore, you posted it on the internal sharing marketplace. Obviously, after some time, 3 months or so, nobody really wants it internally, apparently. So you can just tick a box, and then it becomes visible in the regional network that you happen to be a member of, or you can post it on Flow2 or Flow to Healthcare, and then it becomes visible to every other organization. So my vision for the coming years is that we'll start, implementing this internal sharing marketplaces, because that's what organizations find easy to do. Then they'll say, okay, but we are in this network, or we are in this geographical area. Can you make us an internal sharing marketplace for our colleagues as well, so we can start sharing with some other organizations that we already know and trust. So it's all about these circles of trust. And then if they are used to the sharing, and they have, properly implemented all the systems and protocols for that, then I think they feel safe to share with the rest of the world as well.
So we received one more question, and it kind of goes in line with that. Do you think there's a limit to the opportunities there? Would there ever be a time that the marketplace will get crowded, or that it's?
Well, I don't think it will get too crowded, but what I do think is that we are going to see a different way of consumerism. So what you already see is that organizations are going to sell services rather than products. So if we're going to stick to this healthcare example, Philips is not going to sell MRIs anymore, they're just going to sell scans. So I think, and I hope actually for efficiency reasons, that they're just going to be diagnostic hubs that all healthcare organizations can go to and just rent capacity, rather than them having their own scans and then rent it out when they're not using it themselves. So but that's really long down the road, I guess. But that's more the development that I see that could could disrupt us. But if that happens, that's a good thing.
Great. I think that was a great note to end on. Seb, do you have any more questions or anything to add? Oh, muted. Seb, I think you're muted.
Seb, you're muted. Are we muted? Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so we just got word from Seb that his audio is failing, so we are going to close the session. Thanks all for participating. If you have any questions, just feel free to contact us. Thank you again. I don't know how many of you are out there, so it's a bit weird to just talk to my screen. But hope hearing from you, and have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.